Hi there, it's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I begin a series of videos of mini reviews on this book, one of my all-time favorites, Infinite Jest. So today I'm going to cover basically the first 95 pages that I was able to get through, and that does not include the 10 pages of notes in errata, or what is pretty much known as the endnotes of this section, most of which are about the James Owen Incandenza filmography. So without ado, let's get into it. I am seated in an office surrounded by heads and bodies. My posture is consciously congruent to the shape of my hard chair. This is a cold room in university administration, wood-walled, Remington-hung, double-windowed against the November heat, insulated from administrative sounds by the reception area outside, at which Uncle Charles, Mr. DeLint, and I were lately received. I am in here. So begins the journey of Infinite Jest. That was the first paragraph I read to you. And the one thing I like to take into account is the sentence, I am in here, which Owen Incandenza, probably one of two main characters in this book, including Don Gately, who shows up later. He seems to have trouble conveying emotion, a lot of emotion, but he keeps saying that it's a recurring theme in that first 17 pages of this book. I am in here, I'm in here. He can feel it, he just cannot express it. That takes place in the Year of Glad, which is part of a subsidized time thing that's going on in America, in the not so distant future America, whereby they've sold the years to different companies for profit. And Hal is basically being interviewed for a position here, but what basically ends up happening is that they try to talk to him privately, explain that, he was once this great student, he's a good tennis player, but he was once a great student, and then all of a sudden his grades started slipping. Sometime during the year of the dependent adult undergarment, which is where most of this book, I'd say about 70 to 80% of this book takes place in that year alone. And what ends up happening is that Hal just is unable to express himself, and what ends up coming out of his mouth is just a series of noises that you just cannot picture what these noises are. You cannot hear what these noises are, but they're so repulsive that it just throws the university administrators off. They're in absolute shock, and it ends with them just taking him out and into a hospital, into an ambulance, being taken to a hospital. And so ends the first 17 pages of the book. But even though this is the beginning of the book, technically it's also the end of the book, because the final sentence, which I think is spoken by a Cuban orderly to Hal, is, "So yo then, man, what's your story?" So yo then, man, what's your story, is what ends this book, but also it is the beginning of this book. What you find out the story that's going on for the rest of the 1,000 page tome that this is. So, David Foster Wallace knew what he was doing. There's a lot of hidden details in here, and especially in that first 17 pages, there was, on my reread, I found so much interesting information that just slipped by me the first time I read this. And since then, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and done a lot of research into theories about this book. And there's things going on, especially in the latter half of that first 17 pages, talking about how recalls when him and two other characters, Don Gately, and I can't remember who the other one is, but they dig up his father's grave, which does not appear in the book at all. And as Wallace once said, a lot of this stuff happens off to the far right of the story. You can piece it together, but it's not actually there. You have to come to your own conclusion. There's also talks in this book, very, very loosely referenced, of a mechanical robot, huge robot in the sky, flying from south to north, or from north to south, out of earshot, out of eyeshot, but it's there. Little things like that I picked up on this time around, where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. So that just shows just how intricately plotted this thing is. Also, based on that first paragraph that you heard me read, you can see that Wallace is a very clinical writer. It's almost like a doctor, just a typical medical doctor sat down and wrote something, and he had a thesaurus open the entire time writing it. And I know some people have accused him of being, someone that just likes to throw $1,000 words basically into it. And there's people that have given up on this book in those first 17 pages alone because they just find the writing to be too distant, to not be emotional, which I disagree with entirely. I think if you look carefully, if you really, really push hard, you can find a true wealth of emotion and melancholy going on in this book, particularly what in the passages that I found just in these first 95 pages alone, just in the first 10% of this book alone. A lot of people have given up in the first 200 pages of Infinite Jest because of just how chopped up it is. And by that, I mean, it goes from one thing to another, to another, to another, all these stories, and they don't seem to be connected. Well, that's not true. There are little references going on in each of these stories that connect one to the other. In particular, this character, this drug dealer who keeps snakes, who lives in a house, or who lives in a trailer, I can't remember, and he keeps a whole bunch of snakes in a tank. And he gets referenced in at least 2 or 3 different chapters in those first 95 pages by different characters who talk about buying drugs off him. During that interview process, Hal recalls a memory of back when he was a kid and his mother, Avril, was doing gardening, and his older brother, Oren, was there, and he walks out and he holds this piece of mold and just says to his mother, "I ate this." And she freaks the fuck out and just starts running almost in circles, screaming, "Help, my child ate this." While everyone around is looking over the fence and looking out the windows at this scene. And I've read some theories out there that this is the beginning of the end for Hal, that this is where all his emotions just completely shut down, was the moment he ate this thing. So that's a good theory. A lot of other theories I found from a guy by the name of Aaron Schwartz or something like that, who was, a bit of a genius wunderkind of his kind, but he died many years ago. He hung himself, and he put together this theory online, pretty much opening up Infinite Jest like a flower, just pretty much providing all his theories on different things and what he perceived the ideas of Infinite Jest to be. So do check that out, because there's a lot of things going on in there where it really opened up in my mind. It is around this time, around page 30, where we get to the story of the medical attaché, a half-ethnic Arab and Canadian, whose partner has gone out for the night, and so he decides to sit in, enjoy a meal, and watch a TP entertainment cartridge. This is their version of basically Netflix, whereby you order any cartridge and it comes to you, and it could be of anything. So very prescient stuff going on. And considering this book was, written in the late 80s, early 90s, and published in 96. So that's pretty good. That's one thing about this book as well. It's just how prescient certain things are going on in this book. But he puts on this entertainment cartridge, and he sits back and he watches it. And this is around about 7 p.m. And then it's littered throughout the rest of the next 60 pages. You get chapter and then another little paragraph which talks about the medical attaché, who is just sitting there completely just drooling. He's wet his pants, watching this entertainment cartridge. And what he's ended up doing is putting it on a loop so that it keeps playing over and over again. And then you find out later on, or hours and hours and hours later, that people are coming in, people are coming in to see him. The Saudi prince has sent his personal guards and personal assistants to go see him. Their personal assistants have come to see him. And eventually you've got a room full of people who have walked in and are just staring at this video, this entertainment piece being played on a loop, unable to just think, unable to think about anything else, unable to live their lives. They are trapped in this piece of entertainment. Now, this is all well and good, and I do love all this, but I've yet to find a piece of writing that I think is what I consider to be beautiful, what I consider to be as good as a certain 100-page section in The Pale King. Right now, this is all just an info dump, pretty much, which I have no problem with. But then we get to the section which is a conversation late at night or early in the morning, hours before Hal has to get up for his tennis training, where he's being woken up by his younger, I can't remember if it's his middle brother or younger brother, I think it's his middle brother, Mario, who is hideously deformed just in so many ways, the poor thing. And Mario almost has like a simplistic mind, but he's able to talk coherently. And what we get here is a wonderful brotherly conversation, which I really liked. Just asking about the father, asking about life in general. It's a beautiful 4 or 5 pages. And also littered in this section, we get one sentence, which is at 2010 hours on 1st of April, year of the dependent adult undergarment, the medical attaché is still watching the unlabeled entertainment cartridge. So as I said earlier, just peppered throughout this first 100 pages are this coming back referencing to the medical attaché watching this entertainment cartridge. And that's where you realize that this is an important part of the story, that this will be the main thrust of the plot going forward for the rest of the book. Now we get to probably my second favorite part of the first 100 pages, and that involves the older brother, Owen Incandenza, who's a bit of a womanizer, especially women who have kids. And he's in Tucson, I think he's in Tucson, Arizona, I can't remember, definitely Arizona. And he's getting up in the morning, and he's going to sit in this jacuzzi in this like apartment block area outside where there's no one out there. It's a clear blue sky. He's just like sitting in the jacuzzi, just watching the bubbles go over and all that sort of thing. And then out of nowhere, this wren, this little bird, just drops dead out of the sky, falls down in front of him. And at first he just cannot understand it, but then he just looks at this bird just going under the water and bubbling over and turning over. And I found that to be some of the best writing in this whole section. It's just him just describing this. It's really something, actually. It has nothing to do with the plot, but it gives you an insight into Oren's thinking process, which I actually quite liked. It also provides you information on his absolute fear of roaches, which give him the quote howling fantods, which is something that's used throughout this book by many other characters, which I quite enjoyed. I forgot about that little couple of words there, so I'm going to start using that in everyday life. With the next chapter, you get a lot more to do with how Incandenza. What you do find out, he's a bit of a pot smoker. He talks about being almost in this labyrinthine underground sewer system of sorts, like pipe system that's underneath the tennis academy. It's very intricately detailed, and I got lost a couple of times, so I had to go back and reread it, trying to map out this building and all the tunnels underneath it in my mind. I remember the first time I read this, I couldn't perceive it as much, but now this time I was able to, really take it in and get an idea of it. And he talks a lot about all the multiple characters who know that he gets high or may not know that he gets high. And this includes Michael Pemulus, Jim Struck, Bridget C. Boone, Jim Troelch, Ted Shutt, Trevor Axford, and possibly Kyle D. Coyle and Tall Paul Shaw. And a few of those characters do show up multiple times throughout the book. Yeah. So there's a multitude of characters in this tennis academy that do get their own fair share of text time, so to speak. What I also noticed is that by the time I got to this bit, which is page 50, only 2 endnotes have appeared, which really took me by surprise. I remember reading this and having to flip back and forth between the back of the book and the front of the book. But I was very surprised to find that, being 50 pages in and only having to go to the back twice. But it wasn't until the next chapter where the whole drug system came out. This takes place in the year of the dairy products from the American heartland. And oh boy, it's just the amount of endnotes that are in this section which detail all the different drugs that get used. See if I can name a few of them. So we got methamphetamine hydrochloride, aka crystal meth, Drines, you got Valium, and that's like a lot of medical terms here, not just written like that, but written in full detail, sentences dedicated to it. Psilocybin, MDMA, LSD 25, meperidine hydrochloride. The list is endless, and it's all dedicated to this chapter here, which introduces the second main character in the book, Don Gately, and it details his addiction process and how he broke into a well-known Canadian or Quebecois person's house while they were incredibly sick, while their family was out for the weekend. He's very, very sick, and they tie him up and they cover his mouth and his nose so he can't breathe. They break in and steal some drugs and a few other things, and they pretty much leave him to die as they leave the house. That too is a wonderful section. I quite enjoyed that section very much. And this is the opening paragraph to that section. Drug addicts driven to crime to finance their drug addiction are not often inclined toward violent crime. Violence requires all different kinds of energy, and most drug addicts like to expend their energy not on the professional crime, but on what their professional crime lets them afford. Drug addicts are often burglars, therefore. One reason why the home of someone whose home has been burglarized feels violated and unclean is that there have probably been drug addicts in there. So this is getting to the point now where I'm actually starting to really appreciate Wallace's writing. I mean, at the start of the book, it feels almost rushed, that he's really being very clinical, medical with it. But now he's able to formulate sentences that I can really relate to, that I can see being panned out in a far better structure than previous. And I do, if I remember carefully, or if I remember correctly, it gets better and better as the book goes on, the sentences and all that sort of thing. Like Wallace, over the years that he took to write this book, just got better and better as a writer until he finished the book. So that's one interesting thing to take note of. Another brilliant chapter, this is only like a page and a half long, but it talks about Owen being part of an American football team. and the whole thing is dedicated to them flying out of a plane to the ground inside a stadium, and just Owen being just shit scared. I mean, the opening sentence is, "I hate this." Owen yells out to anyone who flies by near. It's a really wonderful sequence, just visualizing it going on. But before that chapter, we get one also taking place in the year of the Dependent Adult Undergarment, and this is where you find out about James Incandenza and his wonderful filmography. One of my favorite endnotes in this entire book. And this is one of the longest endnotes in the whole book. I mean, it's about like 8 pages long or something like that. So buckle up. But what I loved most about this is that I didn't even see this the first time around. I was just reading it just to get through it because of how long it was. But having to take my time with it, I was able to see, just how the filmography just goes from, the pre-subsidized time through to the beginning of, the year of the Whopper and the year of this and the year of that. And not only that, but the characters that get involved in the stories as well, such as Madame Psychosis. It's the first mention of her that we get, and she's one of my all-time favorite characters in the book itself. And then inside the book, you get little things that are going on. Like one of the videos in here is dedicated to someone who dresses up as someone to talk to someone else, which is obviously a reference to when he was having a conversation with his son Hal. There's another video that's dedicated to, I think, someone who's sleeping with a woman who is sleeping with her half brother or adoptive brother or something like that, which is an obvious reference to Avril and her half brother who runs the academy. But what I love most of all is just the names of some of these things. I mean, we got stuff here like Union of Theoretical Grammarians in Cambridge, Union Nurses of Berkeley. This is probably my favorite one out of all of them. The Joke, before subsidized time. Lactrodectus Macton's Productions, audience as reflective cast. Parody of Hollis Frampton's audience-specific events. 2 Ikigami EC35 video cameras in theatre record the film's audience and project the resultant raster onto screen. The theatre audience watch itself, get the obvious joke, and become increasingly self-conscious and uncomfortable and hostile, supposedly comprises the film's involuted narrative flow. That's just brilliant. I would love to see that film. And there's just more and more, and it ends with Infinite Jest, possibly the finished product of number 4, or maybe Infinite Jest number 5. This is the one with Madame Psychosis, and this is the one that's getting passed around. This is the one that the medical attaché is watching. Not much is known about it, but it's either the 4th one finished or the 5th one. So that's one that is like my top 2 favorite parts of everything that I've read so far in this reading project. What follows then is my favorite part. This is the highlight of the first 100 pages for me. And this is the conversation that a certain suicidal person by the name of Kate Gompert, or Catherine Gompert. She thinks about 19 or something like that. And it's her conversation with a doctor who just won't look up at her. She's being held on suicide watch because she tried to OD on at least, I think, 150 different types of medication pills. When her mother found her, she was on the floor trying to eat her own rug. And the nurses have to just sit there and just keep watch on them, just not take their eyes off them. Doctor tells the nurse to go outside, and he proceeds to just ask her how she is. And he's doing this, asking all these questions without even looking up from the clipboard. She's just looking at the clipboard, or the doctor, he is just looking at the clipboard, writing things down. And Kate is just sitting there on the bed in that, that position that all suicidals are in, where they're sort of got their knees up against their chest, hands around it, unwashed hair. She's an absolute mess. And what proceeds is absolutely, this to me is the best writing that Wallace has done, in my mind at least, until I continue reading this book, obviously. But she proceeds to tell him or try and illustrate for him just how this feels, how it feels to be suicidal, how it feels to end it all, how even though she may look like she's fine on the outside, she is absolutely dead on the inside, that she just wants it to end, that she just cannot bear having all this hurt inside her. And the doctor's obviously seeing it as just being a teenage thing, or just something that she'll grow out of, but she's trying to persuade him, no, this is something different. This really hurts. This is something that I just want to die. Please help me die, or prescribe a recovery plan, whether it's ECT or just a multitude of electroconvulsive therapy or drugs, just anything. Help me end this pain that I'm constantly feeling, even though it's not technically physical. It's really quite shocking. It's really sad, really somber, really powerful stuff. And I loved it. I think it's really wonderful. I think it showcases Wallace's way as a writer. The attempt had been serious, a real attempt. The girl had not been futzing around. A bona fide clinical admit right out of Yevtushenko or Dretsk. Over half the admits to psych wards are things like cheerleaders who swallow 2 bottles of Midol over a high school breakup, or Gray learn the asexual depressing people rendered inconsolable by the death of a pet. The cathartic trauma of actually going in somewhere officially psych, some understanding nods, some bare indication somebody gives half a damn. They rally back out they go. 3 determined attempts and a course of shock spelled no such case. The doctor's interior state was somewhere between trepidation and excitement, which manifested outwardly as a sort of blandly deep puzzled concern. After that, we get a beautiful section where one of the pro-rectors of the academy, basically people who are in charge of the younger tennis players, his name is Chit, and he is taking Mario down the streets of Boston to go get ice cream, and they just have a wonderful conversation. It's really beautiful. Another good bit. Then we get to Tiny Ewell, who, as it says here, he is a tiny elf-sized US male. His feet barely reach the floor of the taxi. He's just come out of detox. He's going to the Enfield Drug and Rehabilitation Center. But there's a wonderful passage in here that I think is absolutely beautiful, and it's the first time where Wallace has been able to talk about the outside world in such a way, so I'm going to read it to you now. The early November day is foggy and colourless. The sky and the street are the same colour. The trees look skeletal. There is bright wet watered litter all around the seams of street and curb. The houses are skinny 3-deckers mashed together, wharf grey with salt white trim, Madonnas in the yards, bow-legged dogs hurling themselves against the fencing. Some schoolboys in knee pads and scully caps are playing street hockey on a passing school cement playground, except none of the boys seem to be moving. That's wonderful writing right there. That's up there with the Kate Gompert sections. And then, to end it, we got to the final chapter, and this I was a bit surprised that it took us long to get to this, because this is technically the third plot line in the whole book. First one being, the Tennis Academy, second one being the Drug and Rehabilitation Center, and then the third one being the Quebecois separatists and the wheelchair assassins, I think they are as well. But we got Maraf and Steepley. I think Maraf is in a wheelchair and Steepley is dressed in drag, and they're on the mountains overlooking the city of Tucson, Arizona. And I can't remember if this is around the same time where Oren is in that city just down there as well. So it's been a long time since I read it, so I'm not quite sure. But they end up having a conversation about the entertainment cartridge system and how it killed many people, and they're just curious about it, and there's a whole mission about it. So I can't really say much more about this part because I just got into it. But needless to say, that's where I ended the whole thing. So that is the first, basically 100 pages of Infinite Jest that I've been able to get through. I've missed some portions of it, but I'm really liking it so far. It's God. Imagine being an editor, being given this book. Just your brain would just go overload trying to edit this thing. So kudos to those that worked on it. I can't remember his name, but it was one person. Michael Peach, sorry, now I remember it. There's wonderful writing in this. There's obviously flaws, a lot of flaws in this book, but the brilliance of certain sections far outweigh them. This is still a 5-star read in my mind. A beautiful, beautiful book. One thing that really pissed me off, though, is that a lot of these quotes from various people all throughout the book. I'm referring to Wallace as a comedian. Oh, he's a comic. Oh, caustic wit. Oh, so funny. Ambitious, steeply humorous, ridiculously entertaining, funny, darkly comic. It's just, they're all referring to Wallace as a comedian. I'm like, well, fuck off. Because, yeah, there are jokes in this book, but they're to help balance out just how deep and personally sad this really is. I mean, this is about America that's gone to shit, about a country and a community that have just gone downhill, about a whole bunch of people that are trying to be force-fed entertainment and addiction in a world where they just want to find happiness. This is a really sad book, and even Wallace in interviews himself has said that he wanted to write a really sad book. So yes, there are jokes, and yes, there are parts that make me laugh, but no, this is mostly just a deeply sad and profound look at a future America of possibly where we're heading, or at least what he thought back in '96. Very prescient times. I'm going to have to leave it at that because the video is about to run out, but I'm going to read the next 100 pages and provide you another video next Friday. Thank you for watching part 1 of my Infinite Jest reading project book review. Thank you very much. See you next time.